Rich man abandons his daughter on the street for 3 days, but someone shows up and does something. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The scorching sun beat down on the asphalt of Central Park Square when Benedict Caldwell parked his imported car in front of the bandstand. His hands trembled on the steering wheel as he watched his 6-year-old daughter in the back seat, playing carelessly with her favorite doll. Iris had curly hair tied in pigtails and wore a pink hand-embroidered dress, the same type of embroidery that had made the Caldwell family one of the most prosperous in North Carolina. "Daddy, are we at the park?" Iris asked with her sweet little voice, without imagining that this would be the moment that would change her life forever. Benedict took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the words he was about to pronounce. At 52, the businessman had built an empire based on the tradition of North Carolina embroidery, but now everything was crumbling like a sandcastle. 3 weeks ago, he discovered that Everett Mendez, his partner for 15 years, had embezzled almost all of the company's fortune. The bank accounts were empty, the suppliers were demanding payment, and bankruptcy was knocking on the door. "Iris, Daddy needs you to stay here for a little while," he said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "You need to learn that in life. We don't always have everything served to us on a silver platter." The girl frowned, confused. During her 6 years of life, she had never lacked anything. She lived in a mansion in the upscale neighborhood of Asheville, had 3 maids at her disposal, and a room full of imported toys. For her, the world was a safe and welcoming place, where all her wishes were quickly fulfilled. "But Daddy, I don't want to be alone," Iris murmured, her voice beginning to tremble. "Isn't Mommy coming to pick me up?" Benedict closed his eyes for a moment, remembering the terrible argument he had with Valerie the night before. His 45-year-old wife had screamed, cried, and begged him to reconsider his insane decision to abandon their daughter in the park. But he remained adamant, convinced that this harsh lesson was necessary. How could he teach his daughter the value of things if she had never faced hardship? 3 days, Iris. Just 3 days and Daddy will be back," he lied, knowing that he would be watching her every move from afar. "You're a smart girl. You'll manage." Before Iris could protest, Benedict got out of the car, opened the back door, and removed a small pink backpack. Inside was just a change of clothes, a bottle of water, and $50 in small bills. He handed the backpack to his daughter, who looked at him with tears in her eyes, not understanding what was happening. "Daddy, I promise to be a good girl," Iris sobbed, clinging to her father's leg. "Don't leave me here, please." Benedict's heart broke at that moment, but he forced himself to pull away. He got in the car without looking back and sped off, leaving his daughter planted in the middle of the square, holding her doll and crying inconsolably. Through the rearview mirror, he saw the small figure running after the car, shouting for him, until the distance swallowed her up. Iris stood in the same place for almost an hour, waiting for her father to return. The square was bustling that Thursday morning. Vendors sold lemonade, pretzels, and fudge, while retirees played checkers under the trees. Some people looked curiously at the well-dressed girl who was crying alone, but no one approached her. That's when Mary Sanders noticed the unusual situation. At 38, she had worked as a pretzel vendor in Central Park Square for 15 years, knew every stone, every tree, every person who frequented the place. She had never seen such a small child abandoned in that way, especially a girl who obviously belonged to a wealthy family. Mary was a woman of average height, brown hair always tied in a simple bun, and hands calloused from hard work. Her face carried the mark of someone who had faced many difficulties, but her brown eyes still held a special tenderness, especially when she looked at children. She had lost her own daughter Felicity 8 years ago in a terrible accident that left her with a void in her chest that she could never fill. "Hi, sweetie," Mary said, approaching Iris slowly. "Where's your mum?" Iris looked up, her eyes red from crying. "Daddy left and said he'll only be back in 3 days, she replied between sobs. "But I don't know how to be alone." The revelation shocked Mary. What kind of father would abandon a 6-year-old child in a public park for 3 days? She looked around, searching for a responsible adult who might be watching the situation, but she didn't see anyone suspicious. "What's your name?" Mary asked, kneeling down to the girl's height. "Iris Caldwell," the child replied, wiping her nose on the sleeve of her embroidered dress. The last name hit Mary like a punch in the gut. Caldwell, the same family that had ruined her life years ago when she worked as an embroiderer at the factory and her creations were stolen by her boss. Benedict Caldwell had become a millionaire, selling the design she created during the wee hours after long days of work. When she tried to claim her rights, she was fired and publicly humiliated. Now, by a cruel twist of fate, the daughter of that man was there, vulnerable and in need of help. Mary felt a confused mix of anger, compassion, and an opportunity she had never imagined having. Maybe it was the chance to finally get the justice she had always sought. "Come with me, Iris," she said, extending her hand. "Auntie Mary will take care of you." Iris hesitated for a moment, remembering her mother's warnings about not talking to strangers, but the desperation and fear of being alone were stronger. She took Mary's calloused hand, not knowing that this simple gesture would trigger a series of events that would shake the entire Caldwell family. As they walked through the square, Benedict watched everything from afar, hidden in a coffee shop across the street. His fists were clenched and his heart was torn, but he remained firm in his decision. He needed to teach his daughter that life wasn't a bed of roses, that you had to fight to achieve things. How could he prepare her for a cruel world if she continued to live in a bubble of protection? What he didn't know was that Mary had kept irrefutable proof for years that the embroideries that made him famous were actually her creations. And now, with Iris in her hands, she would finally have the opportunity to expose the truth and recover what had always been rightfully hers. Mary's house was on a narrow street in the Hillcrest neighborhood, very different from the mansion where Iris was used to living. It was a simple 3-room construction, with walls painted faded blue and a small backyard where she grew herbs and some flowers. For Iris, who had never set foot in such a modest home, everything seemed strange and scary. "This is where you're going to sleep tonight," Mary said, showing a mat on the living room floor. "Tomorrow we'll arrange something better." Iris looked at the mat suspiciously. At home, she slept in a princess bed with a pink canopy and dozens of fluffy pillows. That piece of foam on the floor seemed more like a punishment than a bed. "Auntie Mary, when is my daddy coming to get me?" she asked, for the 10th time since they had arrived. "He said 3 days, didn't he?" Mary replied, hiding the anger she felt towards Benedict. "Then let's wait 3 days." In fact, Mary had already decided what to do. During the night, while Iris slept restlessly on the mat, she rummaged through her belongings stored in an old trunk in the bedroom. There were the original designs of the embroideries she had created 20 years ago, when she worked at the Caldwell factory as an 18-year-old, full of dreams and talent for creating. Each design had her discreet signature in the lower right corner, a small, stylized flower that she had always drawn since childhood. Benedict had reproduced the embroideries, removing her signature, but Mary kept the originals as proof. There were also work contracts, payment receipts, and even photos of her working in the factory, always focused on her designs. The next morning, Iris woke up crying. She had dreamed of her mother, Valerie, who was calling her to have breakfast at the marble table in the kitchen, with warm croissants, fruits cut into fun shapes, and fresh orange juice. When she opened her eyes and saw the cracked ceiling of Mary's house, reality hit her like a bucket of cold water. "I'm hungry," she murmured, rubbing her eyes. Mary served a plate of grits with fried egg. Iris looked at the food with a disgusted face, used to the elaborate dishes that the maids prepared at home. But the hunger spoke louder, and she ate everything, discovering that even simple food could taste good when you were really hungry. "Today, you're coming to work with me," Mary announced. "If you're going to stay here, you need to help." Iris didn't really understand what working meant, but she followed Mary to Central Park Square. The pretzel cart was set up under a tree, with a small table, ovens, ingredients, and benches for customers to sit on. Throughout the morning, Iris watched Mary prepare the pretzels with impressive agility, talking to the regular customers who had known her for years. "Is this girl your granddaughter?" asked Mrs. Johnson, a retiree who bought a pretzel every day. "She's a relative who's staying with me for a few days," Mary replied, avoiding lying completely. In the middle of the afternoon, an elegant man in a suit approached the cart. Iris recognized him immediately. It was Everett Mendez, her father's partner, but something in his gaze made her hide behind Mary. "Good afternoon," Everett said with a fake smile. "Isn't this Benedict Caldwell's daughter?" Mary felt a shiver down her spine. "Do you know the girl?" "I know her very well," Everett replied, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Benedict must be worried, looking for her everywhere." "Her father knows where she is," Mary lied, pulling Iris closer. Everett chuckled. "Oh, so he really did it. Abandoned his own daughter to force me to return the company's money." He bent down to Iris's height. "Didn't your daddy tell you that? The factory is going bankrupt, little one. That he doesn't have any more money to buy your expensive dolls." Iris started to cry. She didn't quite understand what Everett was saying, but she realized that it was something very bad. Mary picked her up, glaring at the man. "Get out of here now," she said in a firm voice. Calm down, calm down," Everett smiled. "I just came to let you know that I know where the girl is, and that this can be very useful for all of us." He left a business card on the table and walked away, leaving a veiled threat in the air. That night, while Iris slept, Mary received an unexpected call. It was Valerie Caldwell, desperate. "Please, tell me where my daughter is," she pleaded, crying on the phone. "I know someone saw her with a woman in the park. I'm capable of anything to get her back." "Your daughter is fine," Mary replied coldly. "Better than she would be if she continued to be raised by a father who abandons her in a public park." "You don't understand," Valerie sobbed. "Benedict is desperate too. He thinks he's doing the right thing, teaching a lesson, but he's destroying our family. The company is going bankrupt. We've lost almost everything, and now he's gone crazy." With this idea that Iris needs to learn how to survive on her own, Mary felt a pang of compassion, but she didn't let herself soften. 20 years ago, your husband stole from me. He took my designs, my creativity, my dreams, and built an empire on top of my art. Now it's his turn to learn what it means to lose." "What designs? What are you talking about?" Valerie asked, confused. "Ask your husband about Mary Sanders, the embroiderer he fired when she tried to claim the rights to her own creations." The silence on the other end of the line lasted long seconds. Finally, Valerie whispered, "You're her, the woman who created the embroideries that gave us all this. And now your daughter is going to help me prove it," Mary said before hanging up the phone. The next day, the second day of abandonment, Iris was more adapted to the routine. She helped Mary at the pretzel cart, learning to fold napkins and organize the seasonings, but her natural joy had disappeared, replaced by a deep sadness that made her question whether her father would really come back for her. That's when a local journalist appeared in the square, accompanied by a cameraman. Everett had fulfilled his threat. He had told the press about the businessman who had abandoned his young daughter in a public square. The news was causing a scandal in the city. "Is it true that you are Benedict Caldwell's daughter?" asked the reporter, pointing the microphone at Iris. The girl hid behind Mary, terrified by the cameras and the crowd that was beginning to form. Mary protected her, covering her with a cloth, but the damage had already been done. In a matter of hours, the story would spread throughout Asheville, and the Caldwell family's reputation would be destroyed forever. That night, Benedict finally broke. After 2 days of watching his daughter from afar, seeing her working at the pretzel cart and sleeping in a simple house, he couldn't take it anymore. He drove to Mary's house, determined to pick up Iris, but found the door locked and the house empty. Mary had fled with the girl, and Benedict had no idea where they could be. Mary had taken Iris to her sister Josephine's house in the West Asheville neighborhood on the other side of the city. The girl was confused and frightened by yet another change, starting to develop a fever and constant headaches. The stress of being abandoned by her father, sleeping in strange places, and not understanding what was happening around her was taking its toll on the small 6-year-old body. "Auntie Mary, I want to go home," Iris cried, huddled in a corner of the room at Josephine's house. "I want my mommy." "Not yet, sweetie," Mary replied, wiping the girl's sweaty forehead with a damp cloth. "It's not time yet." In fact, Mary was starting to question her own actions. Seeing Iris get sick because of the situation reminded her of her own daughter, Felicity, whom she had lost when the girl was only 8 years old. A mother's pain never completely disappears, and Mary found herself torn between the thirst for revenge against Benedict and the maternal instinct that Iris awakened in her. Meanwhile, Benedict was going crazy. He had looked for Mary all over the city, visited relatives, questioned neighbors, but no one knew where she was. The story had spread through the local newspapers, and now all of Asheville knew about the case of the businessman who had abandoned his young daughter. Clients cancelled orders, suppliers demanded payment, and his reputation was in tatters. "You need to find our daughter," Valerie shouted, who hadn't been able to sleep for 3 nights. "I don't care what you wanted to teach Benedict. Iris is just a child." "I know where she is," Benedict said one morning after receiving an anonymous call. "Everett told me he can take me to her, but he wants something in return." Valerie felt her blood run cold. "What does he want?" "The definitive signature of the company. If I transfer everything to his name, he'll take me to Iris." "Then sign it," Valerie exploded. "Sign everything. The company isn't worth more than our daughter." Benedict knew that his wife was right, but something deep down told him that there were more mysteries in this story. Why would a pretzel vendor risk so much to hide an unknown child? Why did Everett seem to know exactly where Iris was? And above all, why did the name Mary Sanders sound so familiar to him? That's when he remembered. 20 years ago, a young embroiderer named Mary worked in his factory. She was talented, creating beautiful designs during the wee hours, but she had been fired after a dispute over copyright. At the time, Benedict was young and ambitious, not caring much about the feelings of employees. Now, 2 decades later, he was beginning to understand that he might have committed injustices in the past. At Josephine's house, Iris was getting worse. The fever had increased and she could barely eat. She cried constantly for her father and mother, asking when she could go home. Mary took her to a community health clinic where the doctor diagnosed severe stress in such a young child. "She needs to go home," said Dr. Abernathy, a 50-year-old man who had known Mary for a long time. "A 6-year-old child doesn't have the emotional structure to deal with such a situation. If it continues like this, she may develop permanent trauma." Mary left the clinic with a heavy heart. She was using an innocent child to take revenge on a man who might not even remember the injustices he had committed in the past. but 20 years of humiliation and poverty weighed on her conscience. Every time she saw Caldwell embroideries being sold in expensive stores, she remembered that those designs had come out of her head, her hands, her wee hours of hard work. That's when Josephine, her older sister, decided to intervene. "Mary, you're destroying this girl because of an old grudge. Iris is innocent." "And I was also innocent when Benedict stole from me," Mary exploded. "You don't understand, Josephine. He built an empire on top of my designs. My daughter could have had a better life if I had received what was rightfully mine." "Your daughter is gone, Mary," Josephine said softly, "and making another child suffer won't bring her back." That same day, Valerie managed to find out where Iris was hidden. A neighbor of Josephine had recognized the girl from the newspapers and called the Caldwell family. Valerie didn't waste time. She left home determined to find her daughter, with or without her husband's permission. When she arrived at Josephine's house, she found a scene that broke her heart. Iris was lying on a mattress, pale and feverish, calling for her mother in the midst of her delirium. Mary was next to her, wiping her face with genuine affection, like a mother caring for her own daughter. "My daughter!" Valerie cried, running to pick up Iris in her arms. "Mommy!" Iris sighed, finally smiling for the first time in 3 days. Mary stepped aside, watching mother and daughter embrace desperately. For a moment she felt a pang of jealousy. During those 3 days, she had taken care of Iris as if she were her own daughter, and the girl had awakened in her maternal feelings that she thought were dead since the loss of Felicity. "Why did you do this?" Valerie asked, cradling Iris in her arms. "Why did you mistreat an innocent child?" "Your husband stole 20 years of my life," Mary replied, her tears finally welling up. "The embroideries that made you rich are mine. I created every design, every stitch, every detail. And when I tried to claim my rights, I was humiliated and fired." Valerie looked at Mary in amazement. For the first time, she was beginning to understand that maybe her husband wasn't the upright man she thought she knew. "Do you have proof of this?" "I have all the original drawings with my signature," Mary replied. "Contracts, photos, receipts, everything kept for 20 years, waiting for the right time." "Then why didn't you sue my husband in court? Why did you involve my daughter in this?" Mary lowered her head, ashamed. "Because I was young, poor, and no one would believe the word of a factory worker against a businessman. But now, with Iris as a witness to how her father is capable of abandoning her in a park." "You were going to use my daughter as evidence against him," Valerie completed, horrified. At that moment, Benedict arrived at Josephine's house, accompanied by Everett. The businessman had given in to his partner's blackmail, signing the transfer of the company in exchange for information about his daughter's whereabouts. But when he saw Iris in Valerie's arms, pale and sick, his world collapsed. "My princess," he murmured, stretching out his arms. To his surprise and pain, Iris shrank against her mother, afraid of her father. 3 days of abandonment had broken, the blind trust she had always had in Benedict. "I don't want to stay with Daddy," she whispered. "He left me alone." Everett watched the scene with cruel satisfaction. He had gotten everything he wanted. The company was in his hands, the Caldwell family was destroyed, and on top of that, everyone would soon discover that the famous Caldwell embroideries were actually stolen creations of a former employee. In the days that followed, the Caldwell family faced the biggest crisis of their lives. Iris was hospitalized with dehydration and severe stress, refusing to talk to her father and constantly asking for Auntie Mary. The abandonment had created a deep wound in the girl's heart, who now saw Benedict as someone who could leave her again whenever he wanted. "She doesn't even want to look at me," Benedict confessed to Valerie as they watched Iris sleep in her hospital bed. "What have I done, Valerie? How could I think that was right?" Valerie held her husband's hand, but her eyes were cold. "You destroyed our family, Benedict. You lost the company, traumatized our daughter, and now we find out that maybe you stole the designs that gave us all this." "I didn't steal anything," he protested. "Mary worked for me. The designs were made during working hours, using company materials." "And then why was she fired right after questioning the copyright?" Benedict didn't know how to answer. The memories of that time were confused in his mind. He remembered Mary as a talented but also problematic employee, always questioning decisions and claiming credit for the designs. At the time, he had considered it normal to fire her to avoid future problems. Meanwhile, Mary was living an internal dilemma. Every day she went to the hospital to visit Iris, who always smiled when she saw her and asked her to stay longer. The girl had created a deep bond with her, seeing her as the person who protected her when she was abandoned. But Mary knew that she was using this pure feeling of a child for her own purposes of revenge. "Is Auntie Mary going to pick me up when I leave the hospital?" Iris asked every time she visited. "You're going home with your mum and dad," Mary replied, her heart heavy. "But I want to stay with you," the girl insisted. "You didn't abandon me." It was during one of these visits that Everett appeared at the hospital. He had found out about Mary's visits and decided to use the situation for his own interests. With the company already in his hands, he now wanted to ensure that Benedict could never recover it. "Mary, right," he said, approaching her in the hospital corridor. "I'm Everett Mendez, Benedict's former partner. I heard you have interesting evidence about the embroideries." Mary stared at him suspiciously. "What do you want?" "To help you get justice," he smiled falsely. "I can finance a lawsuit against Benedict, get the best lawyers. In return, you help me make sure he never recovers the company." "I don't need your help," Mary replied coldly. "Oh, but you do," Everett insisted. "You're a pretzel vendor suing a well-known businessman. Without financial and legal support, you have no chance. Besides," he looked towards Iris's room, "the girl likes you a lot. It would be a shame if the family decided to move out of Asheville to avoid more scandals." The veiled threat made Mary tremble. The possibility of losing Iris, who had become like a daughter to her, was terrifying. But accepting Everett's help would mean allying herself with the man who had destroyed Benedict's company through trickery. "I need to think," she murmured. "Don't take too long," Everett smiled. "The press is already interested in the story. Tomorrow there will be a report on the stolen embroideries. With or without your cooperation, the truth will come out." That night, Valerie confronted her husband at home. She had spent the day researching Mary Sanders and found old records that confirmed her version of the facts. There were photos of her working in the factory, employment contracts, and even some reports from the time mentioning a talented embroiderer who created unique designs. "It's true, Benedict," she said, throwing the papers on the table. "Mary really created the embroideries, and you really fired her when she tried to claim the rights." Benedict looked at the documents, and the memories came back in full force. He remembered now how Mary arrived early and stayed late, drawing beautiful patterns on the margins of the papers. How he had been impressed by her talent, but also worried when she began to question the ownership of the designs. "I was young," he said, his voice choked. "I was afraid of losing everything I was building. I thought I was being smart, protecting my interests." "And you ruined the life of an innocent woman," Valerie completed. "A woman who now took care of our daughter when you abandoned her." "She kidnapped Iris," Benedict protested. "She saved Iris," Valerie shouted. "You're the one who abandoned her in a public park. If it weren't for Mary, our daughter could have been taken by anyone." The discussion was interrupted by the ringing of the phone. It was the hospital. Iris had worsened during the night, developing pneumonia because of the stress and low immunity. She needed to stay hospitalized for another week. When they arrived at the hospital, They found Mary already there, holding Iris's hand while she slept feverishly. The woman had spent the whole night next to the girl, like a zealous mother caring for her own daughter. "Thank you," Valerie whispered, approaching Mary. "Thank you for taking care of her." Mary looked at Valerie with tears in her eyes. "She reminds me of my Felicity, my daughter who I lost 8 years ago." "How did she go?" Valerie asked softly. "Car accident," Mary replied, her voice trembling. "She was playing in the street when a car... Since then I have a void in my chest that has never closed, until I found Iris." At that moment, Benedict understood the depth of what he had done. Not only had he stolen Mary's work 20 years ago, but now he had placed an innocent child in the middle of a war between adults, and even worse, he had unconsciously used the pain of a mother who had lost her daughter. "Mary," he said, approaching her, "forgive me for everything, for the designs, for the dismissal, for putting Iris in the middle of this." Mary looked at him in surprise. It was the first time in 20 years that she had heard an apology from Benedict Caldwell. "Do you remember the designs?" she asked. "I remember everything now," he replied. "And you're right, they were yours. They always were yours." That's when Everett appeared in the hospital corridor, accompanied by a journalist and a cameraman. "The time has come for the truth to come out," he announced with a malicious smile. The report would be live, and all of Asheville would discover that the famous Caldwell embroideries were actually stolen creations of a former employee. But what no one expected was the revelation that Mary was about to make, a revelation that would change everything and put Everett in a very complicated position. The cameras were positioned in the hospital lobby when Mary made a revelation that no one expected. With the original designs in her hands and Iris awake in her arms, she looked directly at the lenses and said, "It's true that I created the embroideries that made the Caldwell family famous, but there's something you don't know about Everett Mendez." The man's smile instantly faded. "What are you talking about?" You weren't just Benedict's partner," Mary continued, her voice firm despite her nervousness. "You were there the day I was fired. You were the one who suggested to Benedict that he fire me to avoid future legal problems." Everett paled. "That's a lie." "I have recordings," Mary revealed, pulling an old recorder from her pocket. "My sister Josephine worked in the company's cleaning staff at the time. She recorded conversations between you and Benedict about how to get rid of the problematic embroiderer." The journalist approached interested. This story was getting much more complex than he had imagined. "Can you play these recordings?" Mary activated the device, and Everett's young voice echoed through the lobby. "Benedict, this Mary is going to cause trouble. She's talking about copyright, about a lawsuit. It's better to fire her before it turns into a scandal." Then Benedict's hesitant voice was heard. "But she's talented, Everett. Her designs are unique." "And that's exactly why we have to get rid of her now," Everett replied in the recording. "If she can prove that the designs are hers, we lose everything. Fire her, burn the original contracts, and that's it, her word against ours." The silence in the lobby was deafening. Everett tried to deny it, but his voice trembled. "This recording could have been forged. It can be analyzed by experts," the journalist cut in. "If it's authentic, this completely changes the version of the facts." Iris, who was in Mary's arms, watched everything without quite understanding, but she realized that something very important was happening. The girl was still weak from pneumonia, but her presence there made the whole situation even more dramatic. "Auntie Mary," she whispered, "is the man in the suit angry?" "Don't worry, sweetie," Mary replied, kissing her forehead. "Everything will be all right." Benedict, who was watching everything in shock, finally understood the extent of the manipulation he had suffered. Everett wasn't just a dishonest partner. He had orchestrated Mary's destruction from the beginning, and now he was trying to destroy the entire Caldwell family. "You planned all this," Benedict said, staring at Everett. 20 years ago you convinced me to fire Mary, and now you used the situation to steal my company. I saved you from a scandal," Everett shouted, losing his composure. "If Mary had sued you back then, you would have lost everything. And even so, you stole from us now," added Valerie, who had arrived running after hearing about the commotion. "You used our family's disgrace to take over the company." The journalist was recording everything, realizing that he had stumbled upon a story much bigger than he had imagined. "Mr. Mendez, do you confirm that you convinced Mr. Caldwell to fire Mrs. Sanders to prevent her from claiming the rights to the embroideries?" Everett stammered, realizing that he had fallen into a trap. "I was acting for the good of the company." "By lying and deceiving a talented woman?" the reporter pressed. That's when Mary made her second bombshell revelation. "There's one more thing you need to know. During these last 3 days, taking care of Iris, I discovered something about my own daughter." Everyone turned to her, waiting. Iris snuggled closer in her arms, feeling that something important was about to be said. "My daughter Felicity wasn't the victim of a simple traffic accident," Mary continued, her voice choked. "The driver who ran her over was driving drunk. He was an employee of Everett's trucking company, returning from a company party." The shock was general. Everett recoiled, trying to deny it. "This has nothing to do with me." "You covered up the case," Mary accused. "You paid the driver's family to say nothing, transferred him to another city. My daughter lost her life because of the irresponsibility of one of your employees, and you covered it up." Valerie brought her hand to her mouth, horrified. "Oh my God. That's why I kept all this for 8 years, Mary continued, tears streaming down her face. "It wasn't just about the embroideries. It was about justice for my daughter, too." Iris, even not understanding everything, realized that Mary was very sad. With her little hands, she wiped the tears from the face of the woman who had become like a second mother to her. "Don't cry, Auntie Mary," she whispered. "Iris is here." The simple gesture of the girl broke the hearts of everyone present. There was an innocent child comforting a woman who had lost her own daughter in the middle of a battle between adults that had lasted decades. Everett, seeing that he was completely losing control of the situation, made one last desperate attempt. "Even if all this is true, the company is already in my name. Benedict signed the transfer." "Under duress," Valerie replied firmly. "You blackmailed my husband using our daughter. This voids any contract." The journalist approached Benedict. "Mr. Caldwell, do you confirm that you signed the transfer of the company under blackmail?" Benedict looked at Iris in Mary's arms, then at his wife, and finally at the cameras. "I confirm. Everett said he would only take me to my daughter if I signed the transfer. I used a sick child as a bargaining chip." The public confession was the final blow. Everett knew he was defeated, but he couldn't accept it. 20 years of planning, of manipulation, of waiting for the perfect opportunity, and now everything was collapsing because of old recordings and a girl's love for a woman who had taken care of her. "You don't understand," he shouted, desperate. "I deserved that company. I worked as hard as Benedict. I created strategies. I got clients. Why would only he get all the glory?" "Because you chose the path of betrayal," Mary replied calmly. "Just as you chose to cover up the tragedy of my daughter." At that moment, 2 court officers arrived at the hospital. Valerie had activated her lawyers, who had obtained an injunction to suspend the transfer of the company based on the evidence of duress. Everett would be investigated both for the embezzlement of money and for covering up the accident that caused Felicity's death. But the biggest revelation was still to come, and it would change the relationship between all those people forever. 6 months after the events that shook Asheville, the city had witnessed an extraordinary transformation. Everett was arrested and convicted both for embezzlement and for failure to provide assistance in the case of Felicity's death. The company returned to Benedict's hands, but he made a decision that surprised everyone. "I want to create a new company," he announced at a meeting with lawyers Valerie and Mary, a partnership where Mary is recognized as the true creator of the original embroideries. Iris, who now at 7 years old had completely recovered from pneumonia, but still carried emotional scars from the abandonment, was sitting on Mary's lap. The girl had categorically refused to live only with her biological parents, insisting that Mary be part of her life daily. "But I want Auntie Mary to live with us," Iris said, hugging the neck of the woman she considered her second mother. The solution found was unique. Mary moved into a house on the same property as the Caldwell family in an arrangement that allowed Iris to have constant access to the two maternal figures she loved. Valerie, far from being jealous, had developed a genuine friendship with Mary, recognizing how much she had saved not only Iris, but the entire family. The new company, named Fabiana and Iris Embroideries, in honor of the two girls who had united their lives in an unexpected way, became a symbol of justice and reconciliation in North Carolina. Mary was the creative director, officially recognized. As the author of the designs that became successful, Benedict took care of the administrative part, working tirelessly to repair the mistakes of the past. "Auntie Mary, tell the story of your designs again?" Iris asked every night before going to sleep. "Once upon a time, there was a girl who dreamed of creating beautiful things," Mary began, stroking the child's hair. "She drew flowers, birds, and stars, believing that her creations could make the world more beautiful. And then a bad man stole her designs." "Not really bad," Mary corrected gently. "He was a man who was afraid and made wrong decisions. But you know what happened in the end." "What?" "He apologized for real and helped the girl recover her dreams, and she discovered that she had gained something much more precious than the designs, a new family." Iris smiled, snuggling closer in Mary's arms. The girl had learned through pain and overcoming that family isn't just who gives birth to us, but who chooses to love and care for us, even in the most difficult moments. Benedict, watching the two from the bedroom door, felt a mixture of pain and gratitude. Pain for having almost lost his daughter due to his rash decisions, and gratitude for having found in Mary not only a talented woman who deserved justice, but someone who loved Iris with the purity of a mother. "She still has nightmares sometimes," Valerie confessed one night as they watched Iris sleep. "She dreams that you abandon her again." "I know," Benedict replied, his voice full of remorse. "I carry that guilt every day, but I'm trying to prove to her day after day that I will never abandon her again." "Time heals," said Mary, who had joined them. "Iris is strong. She will overcome this, as she overcame the 3 days in the park." The new company prospered, not only financially, but as a symbol of second chances and redemption. The embroideries gained a special line called True Stories, where each piece told the saga of ordinary people who had overcome adversity. The story of Mary and the Caldwells became a legend in Asheville, inspiring other families to resolve old conflicts through dialogue and justice. "Daddy," said Iris one afternoon while playing in the yard, "do you really love me even when I throw a tantrum?" Benedict knelt down to his daughter's height, holding her small face between his hands. "Iris, Daddy loves you unconditionally, even when he makes wrong decisions, like that one in the park. It's because he's trying to take care of you. But I will never leave you alone again, okay? And if I'm very naughty, I will continue to love you. And if Auntie Mary gets mad at me, she will also continue to love you. And you know why? Because true love doesn't disappear, even when we make mistakes. Iris smiled, running to hug Mary, who was watering the flowers in the garden. Auntie Mary, do you love me even when I'm stubborn? I love you the way you are, sweetie, Mary replied, lifting Iris into her arms. Stubborn, naughty crybaby. Happy? I love you in all your ways. And you'll never leave? Never, promised Mary, sealing the promise with a kiss on the girl's forehead. That late afternoon in Asheville, as the sun set over the new embroidery factory, 3 generations of women, Valerie, Mary, and Iris, worked together creating new designs. Each embroidered stitch carried not only technique and beauty, but also the lessons learned about forgiveness, family, and the strength of true love. The girl who had been abandoned in a park discovered that sometimes we lose one family to gain another even bigger, and that the strongest bonds aren't those of blood, but those forged in mutual care, protection, and unconditional love. Benedict, watching his daughter laugh with Mary and Valerie, finally understood that the true wealth wasn't in the embroideries he had sold for years, but in the love he had almost lost and managed to recover. And that the courage of a 6-year-old girl and the maternal heart of a woman who had lost her own daughter had saved not only his company, but his soul. The story of little Iris and Auntie Mary became a legend in Asheville, told from generation to generation as proof that even the most hopeless situations can turn into new beginnings full of hope when there is true love to guide the way.